It was the kind of Saturday that seemed built for memories. Clear skies, mild breeze. The smell of sunblock and freshly mowed grass clung to the air. Our neighborhood had a knack for going all in on children's parties. Something about the communal guilt of busy parents trying to overcompensate. And today, it was our son Caleb's 5th birthday. Our backyard had transformed into a sugar-fueled paradise. Inflatable bounce house groaning under the weight of hyper-toddlers, folding tables groaning with pizza boxes and cupcake towers, and a soundtrack of squeals and laughter that danced over the fence line. A magician with a twitchy, I was midway through making balloon animals that somehow all looked like confused swans. And then there was Lila. She had this gift, my wife. She could glide through any social setting. A smile stretched across her face like it had been painted on by angels. Strands of dark hair curled perfectly around her ears, and her sundress, white with tiny yellow tulips, floated around her as if she were walking through a commercial for summer. I watched her from the porch, sipping warm lemonade from a red Solo cup. She crouched beside Caleb, wiping icing from his cheek and laughing at something he said. It should have been a perfect scene, one that would later live in scrapbooks and digital albums. But I felt it then, a disturbance in the rhythm. She was smiling too brightly. Her hand lingered on Caleb's shoulder a second too long, like she needed something solid to anchor her. And then, over her shoulder, I saw him. The photographer. He was younger than me. Mid-30s maybe. Lean. Not handsome in the obvious way, but sharp. His shirt sleeves rolled up, revealing a forearm tattoo that peeked just above his wrist as he adjusted the lens on a sleek black camera. He wore mirrored sunglasses and a quiet grin, like the world held no real surprises for him anymore. He moved differently, confident, like someone who knew he didn't belong at suburban birthday parties, but had been invited anyway. A hired gun with a lens instead of bullets. Lila introduced him earlier as Daniel, the photographer I told you about from Nicole's party. I must have nodded and shaken his hand. But it's funny how your brain stores a moment differently when it's wrapped in suspicion. Looking back, I couldn't remember what his handshake felt like, only that his eyes, even behind the sunglasses, had swept over my wife with something too close to familiarity. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I needed to enjoy the day, for Caleb. But once that seed is planted, every glance, every too long laugh becomes fertilizer. Around 3 p.m., the kids gathered for the piñata, a rainbow donkey strung up on a tree branch, swinging gently in the breeze. One by one, the children took their turns with foam bats, most of them too uncoordinated to pose a real threat. The parents stood around, sipping drinks, chatting, occasionally ducking from wild swings. I noticed Lila wasn't with the group anymore. Neither was the photographer. The bathroom, I thought. Maybe she was helping someone with juice-stained hands or a potty emergency. But my feet were already moving before the rationalizations finished forming. I walked slowly around the side of the house, past the recycling bins and the sagging garden hose. My breath slowed, my ears tuned for anything out of place. That's when I saw the garage door. It was cracked open, just a few inches. Enough for someone to slip inside without drawing attention. We rarely used the garage anymore, not since we converted it into a half-finished studio space for Lila's painting hobby. I reached for the handle and pushed it open, just enough to step inside. And there they were. Her back was to me. His hand was on her hip. They weren't fully undressed. Nothing scandalous in the cinematic sense. Just close. Too close. He was leaning in, whispering something into her ear. Her face turned slightly, caught in that fleeting second of uncertainty. Or anticipation. I'm still not sure which. She hadn't heard me yet. I stood there, frozen. Not angry. Not hurt. Just empty. Like someone had reached inside and scooped out all the contents that made me human. Then she turned. The moment our eyes met, everything collapsed into slow motion. Her expression shifted from surprise to panic, then guilt. A silent confession. No excuses, no rehearsed lies. Just her mouth slightly open, her eyes wide, and the truth hanging between us like smoke. Daniel stepped back instinctively. He had the decency to look uneasy, but not enough to appear ashamed. I backed away, out of the garage. My hand found the door and pulled it closed with the quiet finality of a drawer shutting on old memories. I didn't slam it. There was no point. Outside, the party continued. Kids screamed with delight as the piñata finally burst open, a waterfall of candy hitting the grass. Parents clapped. Balloons bobbed in the breeze. Music played on. I walked to the porch and sat down. The lemonade in my cup had turned bitter somehow. Minutes later, she emerged. Alone. Her face composed, but not quite right. She didn't say anything. Just walked over to Caleb, knelt, and helped him gather candy. Her smile was back, painted on again, just like before. And I sat there, staring at the woman I thought I knew. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, I realized something far more terrifying than the betrayal. I didn't feel angry. Not yet. But I would. And when it came, it would be tidal. That night, I lay in bed beside her, staring at the ceiling while the fan spun in hypnotic silence. Lila was asleep, or pretending to be. Her breaths came too evenly, her posture too carefully posed in the way you only ever lie down when you're aware of another's gaze. I didn't touch her. I couldn't. There was a chasm between us now, silent and vast. Not wide enough to swallow us whole just yet, but wide enough that her warmth didn't reach me anymore beneath the blankets. It was strange how quickly intimacy could become foreign, how a shared bed could feel like a canyon. Earlier, after the party had died down, she hadn't mentioned the garage. Not once. She laughed with the other parents, packed leftovers in a Tupperware, wiped sticky faces, and thanked Daniel like nothing had happened. I watched her from the porch again, my drink untouched this time, the ice slowly melting down to nothing. He left with a casual wave, camera bag slung over one shoulder. No apology, no nod of acknowledgement. Just the soft click of his car door and the hum of an engine disappearing down the road. I didn't follow, didn't demand an explanation. Not yet. The silence between us, as the hours passed, became its own conversation. Every moment she didn't bring it up was its own kind of confession. By the time she came to bed, makeup washed away and a robe tied around her waist, I knew everything I needed to know. She knew she'd been caught, and she wasn't ready to talk about it. The next morning dawned with gray skies and a drizzle that tapped against the windows like it had come to collect answers. Caleb padded into the room with bedhead and sleep in his eyes, clutching a toy truck in one hand. "Mama, pancakes?" he asked. Lila smiled at him, genuinely, I think, and scooped him up in her arms. "Of course, baby. Chocolate chip or banana?" "Both," he yelled, squirming out of her arms and racing down the hall. I stayed in bed for a moment, listening to her feet trailing after him, the clatter of pans in the kitchen, the fake cheer she wore like perfume. I rose slowly, the way you move when you're not sure what you're walking into. Downstairs, the kitchen smelled like butter and batter. Lila was humming to herself, flipping pancakes, her hair pulled into a lazy bun. She didn't look at me when I entered, just slid a stack onto a plate and set it down for Caleb. Then another plate for me. No words. We ate in silence, broken only by Caleb's chatter about party balloons and the toy dinosaur he got from Aunt Megan. Lila nodded, smiled, answered in short bursts. Not once did she look at me. After breakfast, I found myself in the garage. I hadn't really planned to go out there, but something in me needed to see the space again, to measure the damage. It smelled like paint and dust and wet cardboard. Her canvases leaned against the far wall, half-finished bursts of color that once felt like joy. A stack of old boxes sat near the work table, and in the corner, the faintest scuff mark on the floor. That was where she'd stood, where he had touched her. I crouched there for a moment, fingers grazing the cool concrete, as if I could read the moment like Braille. But it didn't say anything, just cold silence. Later, I pulled up her phone records. I didn't want to be the kind of man who snoops, but that man no longer existed. He had been buried beneath the weight of that garage door. The number was there, not saved under a name, just a 10-digit ghost that appeared too often at odd hours. Late nights, early mornings. Once, while I was at a client meeting out of town, the betrayal wasn't just physical. It had seeped into the spaces I hadn't been watching. 3 days passed, each one colder than the last. She avoided the garage entirely, and I avoided asking the question that hovered between us. I wasn't ready to hear her say it aloud, that it meant something, that it didn't, that it was a mistake, that it wasn't. Every possibility hurt in its own way. Then came the text. I was at work, in the middle of reviewing a pitch deck, when my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. "We should talk. Please. D." I stared at it for a long time, the letters blurring in my vision. My thumb hovered over the delete button, but curiosity outpaced pride. I typed, Meet where? The response came seconds later. Same park. Tomorrow. Noon. When I came home that night, Lila was curled on the couch watching TV. Caleb was already asleep. I stood there for a moment, watching her in the glow of the screen. Her eyes were puffy. She had been crying. She looked up, startled. You okay? She asked, her voice hoarse. I nodded. She opened her mouth to say something, but then shut it again. The silence filled the space between us like fog. I left her there and went upstairs. The next day, I arrived at the park 10 minutes early. It was a small one, tucked between a row of houses and a narrow creek. The kind of place where people walked dogs and teenagers snuck cigarettes. The benches were damp from the morning mist. I chose the one beneath the birch tree and waited. He arrived wearing a windbreaker and jeans, camera slung over one shoulder like an afterthought. He looked ordinary, which somehow made it worse. Daniel sat beside me without a word. For a moment, we just watched a jogger pass by. Then he said, I didn't know she was married. Not at first. I didn't answer. He sighed. She didn't wear a ring. She said she was figuring stuff out. That things were complicated. Are they? I asked, finally turning to face him. He looked surprised. What? Complicated? Are they? He didn't answer. I continued. You're a photographer. You must know the difference between capturing a moment and fabricating one. Which were you doing in my garage? He looked away. I'm not proud of it. That doesn't matter. He shifted, uncomfortable. Look, I care about her. I didn't come here to fight. I came to tell you I'm backing off. She told me you saw us. That she needs to work on her marriage. The words felt like ice water down my spine. So she had talked to him. But not to me. He stood up. I'm sorry, man. For what it's worth. Then he walked away, leaving me with nothing but the faint sound of the creek and the sting of being the last to know. That night, I came home and found her in the garage. She was standing at her easel, brush in hand, painting. The canvas was a storm of blacks and reds, like something trying to tear itself apart. She turned when she heard me. I told him it's over, she said. I didn't respond. I wanted to tell you first, but I didn't know how. Still, I said nothing. Her shoulders sagged. Do you want to talk about it? I looked at her, and for the first time in days, I didn't feel numb. I felt angry, and it burned slow and steady. I want the truth, I said. She nodded, tears forming. Then I'll tell you. I took a step forward. Start with why. The garage was quieter than usual. The kind of silence that pressed inward, hollow and deliberate. The faint hum of the refrigerator in the adjoining laundry room became a metronome, measuring the moment in beats of discomfort. Lila stood with her back to me, arms folded across her stomach as if she were trying to hold herself together. I remained by the door, unsure if I should come closer or stay in the doorway like an observer in a museum of our broken life. She finally turned. Her eyes were red, but not dramatic. This wasn't the theatrical weeping of someone seeking forgiveness. It was the drained look of a woman who had cried alone too many nights and finally ran out of tears. You want the truth, she said. All of it. I nodded. I didn't plan any of this, Michael. I swear to you. The way she said my name, deliberately, almost reverently, made me realize how long it had been since I'd heard it from her lips. She gestured toward the easel, toward the storm of red and black that she'd been pouring herself into since the party. It started with a compliment. That's all. Something stupid. He liked my work. I didn't speak. He said it felt alive, that it looked like I painted with emotion instead of technique. And for a minute, just a minute, I felt seen. Her voice cracked at the last word. I didn't expect it to matter so much. But it did. It's been so long since anyone asked me what I wanted without needing it to serve a purpose. You've been amazing. You always have. A good father, a provider, stable, but somewhere in the comfort. I think I started to disappear. That word struck me. Disappear. Was I supposed to apologize for creating a life too steady? Too secure? For giving her a house with locks on the doors and bills paid on time? She kept going, her eyes flicking toward the ground. I didn't sleep with him. Not in the way that word implies. But I let him into places that belonged to you. Into thoughts and corners I should have kept sacred. I clenched my jaw. You kissed him. She didn't deny it. In the garage? I asked, though I already knew the answer. She nodded. I was going to stop it. I swear I was. I wanted to feel something again. There it was. The explanation that wasn't really an explanation at all. The emotional quicksand I'd heard described in books, podcasts, Late-night confessions from strangers on the internet. People talk about infidelity like it's a mistake, a lapse in judgment. But when you're the one on the receiving end, it doesn't feel like a stumble. It feels deliberate, chosen. I loved you, I said, and immediately hated how past tense it sounded. She looked up at me, her face crumpling. I still do, she whispered. But love wasn't a band-aid, and apologies weren't stitches. Some wounds didn't stop bleeding just because someone said sorry. For a while, we stood there, suspended in the heavy quiet of broken things. Eventually, she walked past me and disappeared down the hall. I stayed behind in the garage, surrounded by canvases she'd painted in brighter times. One of them, an abstract swirl of blues and yellows, hung slightly crooked on the wall. It was the first piece she'd sold when she opened her Etsy store. I remembered the night she framed it. She'd danced around the kitchen in her socks, shouting, "Someone out there wants my mess on their wall." I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. Family trips, Christmas mornings, Caleb's toothless grins. And then, accidentally, I came across a picture of Lila and me at our engagement party, years ago. We were laughing, her hand in mine, our foreheads touching like no one else existed. How do you reconcile that person with the one who opened her heart to someone else, even if it was only halfway? The next few days passed in strange rhythms. We moved around each other like shadows, careful, quiet, never colliding. Caleb sensed something, of course. Kids always do. He became clingier, always asking for extra bedtime stories or for us to play together, all three of us, like he needed the illusion of unity to settle his nerves. I went through the motions. Work, dinner, clean up. But inside, the anger started to morph into something heavier. Not hatred, not even resentment, just grief. Grief for the marriage I thought we had. Grief for the woman I believed I knew. And grief for the man I used to be, before suspicion became my default setting. One night, about a week after the party, Lila approached me as I sat on the couch, scrolling absent-mindedly through my phone. "I think we should go to therapy," she said softly. I looked up, startled. I've already looked into a few couples counselors. Just to see if there's anything left. I stared at her for a long moment. "What do you want me to say to a stranger?" I asked. That I wasn't enough? "No," she said quickly. That we weren't enough. That we stopped seeing each other. That somewhere along the way, we became roommates. I didn't agree. Not aloud. But I didn't shut it down either. That Friday, I took Caleb to the park by myself. He climbed jungle gyms and screamed gleefully as he chased bubbles blown by a birthday clown hired by some other hopeful parents. I sat on a bench, sipping coffee, watching my son. The sun was too bright, the breeze too warm. It all felt off, like the world had forgotten we were supposed to be mourning something. When we returned home, Lila was gone. No note, no explanation, just an empty house and the hum of the fridge. I checked my phone. No message. An hour passed. Then two. As dusk settled, I stepped into the garage, thinking maybe she'd gone there to paint, but it was empty. The easel was bare. The painting of reds and blacks was gone. Then, from the corner of the room, I noticed something taped to the wall. A photo. One of Daniel's. It showed Lila standing in the middle of our backyard during the party. She was surrounded by balloons, her arms stretched wide, eyes closed, laughing. Caleb was mid-run behind her, a cupcake in hand. And in the far distance, blurred, barely visible, I could see myself, standing on the porch, watching. She looked happy, but I wasn't looking at her. The caption scrawled and pinned beneath the photo read, "You never really saw me." I stared at it for a long time. Then my phone buzzed. A single message. "Come find me. I need you to see everything." The message didn't come with a location. Just those 7 words. "Come find me. I need you to see everything." No context. No name. But I knew it was from her. It wasn't that I recognized a number. She'd used a new one. It wasn't her style to be cryptic. Lila had always been the kind of woman who laid things out plainly when she wanted to be heard. But this was different. A summons from someone fractured, reaching not with clarity, but with desperation. I left Caleb with my sister, claiming an errand. I didn't say more. She didn't ask. I think people around us had learned to navigate this crumbling landscape with caution. No sudden movements. No loud noises. It wasn't until I was in the car, engine idling in the dusk, that I realized I had no idea where to go. I checked my phone again. Still no follow-up. So I drove. Nowhere specific, just let the road take me. Out past the shops, the pharmacy, the coffee place Lila used to drag me to on Sunday mornings. My hands steered on instinct. Muscle memory guiding me where logic couldn't. It wasn't until I passed the old red brick building near the water, where she took painting classes years ago, that something clicked. Of course, the old studio. She hadn't been there in years, not since Caleb was born. But I remembered how she described it back then, how safe it felt, how it was the only place she could breathe without being someone else's version of herself. I found it easily. The parking lot was mostly empty, save for a silver Corolla tucked in the corner. Her car. The building's glass door was propped open by a paint can. I stepped inside, the scent of linseed oil and stale air wrapping around me like memory. At the far end of the main room, beneath a bank of wide windows, stood Lila. She was painting, but not in the gentle, graceful strokes I remembered. These were aggressive swaths of color. Charcoal slashes. Blistering reds and blues layered like bruises. I stood there for a moment, watching. She didn't look up. Didn't stop. Then, softly, she said, "I thought you wouldn't come." I didn't answer. "I've been here since yesterday." She dipped her brush again, swirled it, slapped it onto the canvas. "Painting what I can't say." I took a slow step forward. "What are you trying to say?" She finally turned. Her face was tired, hollow-eyed, but not unrecognizable. There was still some of the woman I married inside that expression, just buried beneath ash and regret. "That I messed up," she said. "That I lost myself. And that I pulled you into that loss like it was yours to carry." I said nothing, just waited. She walked over to a second canvas, this one covered in muted grays. "I came here to figure out what I really wanted. I thought maybe if I stripped everything down, no more house, no more baby photos on the fridge, no expectations, I'd find clarity." "Did you?" I asked. Her hands dropped to her sides. "I don't know. I just kept painting." There was silence between us again, but this one felt different. Not the heavy, suffocating kind. Just quiet. Still. Then she walked to a table in the corner and picked up a photo. She handed it to me. It was the same one that had been taped inside the garage. Her arms wide. Caleb mid-run. Me in the background, out of focus. "I found it in my email," she said. "He sent it weeks ago. Said it was one of his favorites. That it captured something honest." She met my gaze. And I hated it. I frowned. "Because it was true," she continued. "I was happy in that moment. But you weren't looking at me. And that felt like a betrayal. Which is stupid, I know. But it's how it felt." I ran a thumb across the glossy edge of the print. "And so what? You found someone who would look at you more?" Her eyes brimmed. "No. I found someone who looked at me. But never into me. That was the difference. He gave me attention, not understanding." I swallowed hard. "And what about me?" I asked. "What did I give you?" She took a long breath. "You gave me stability. Love. A home. But I didn't let you see the parts of me that were slipping. And I got bitter that you didn't notice." I wanted to argue. To tell her I had noticed. That I'd asked, tried, reached. But instead, I just listened. Because maybe part of that was true. We'd both built a life together and then turned our backs on the maintenance. We assumed our foundation was strong enough to weather the cracks. It wasn't. Lila sat on the edge of a paint-splattered stool. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said. "And I don't even know if I deserve another chance." But I had to say it. Out loud. Not through paint. Not in texts or silence or half-truths. I looked down at the photo again. At the version of us frozen in time. Smiling. Unaware of the storm ahead. "I haven't moved out," she added. "Not yet. I thought I would. But I kept waiting for something. A sign, maybe." I raised an eyebrow. "A sign?" She shrugged. "Or a goodbye." I set the photo down on the table. "I don't want a goodbye," I said finally. She looked up, startled. "But I don't want to reset either. I don't want to pretend this didn't happen." "Then what do you want?" she asked. I paused. "I want something honest." We stared at each other. The last light of day filtering through the windows, brushing shadows across her cheek. And for the first time in weeks, she didn't look like a stranger. She looked like someone I'd known for years and was only now meeting for the first time. "I signed us up for therapy," I said. "Not couples. Solo. Just for me." She smiled, weakly. "I think I'll do the same." Outside, the air smelled of wet concrete and coming rain. We left together, not speaking, not holding hands, just walking side by side. At home, Caleb was asleep, his arms wrapped around his stuffed turtle. We checked on him silently, then met again in the hallway. She moved toward the guest room, suitcase still untouched in the corner. But she paused. "If I sleep in here tonight," she said, "will that be okay?" I nodded. As she closed the door behind her, I leaned against the wall, exhaling for what felt like the first time all day. We weren't healed. We weren't okay. But we weren't over either. And for now, that was enough.